Welcome to session, I forgot to write this down, session 10 of the 21st Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. NWIL's land acknowledgement is read at our opening and closing sessions. To view the land acknowledgement statement, please visit our website, NWIL.org, under the land acknowledgement tab. When I am done talking, I will put the link to that in the Whova chat. Today is up. Thank you. Today is September 16th, 2022. This session is titled Using Rapido as Consortia, the Experience of CSU, and will be presented by Megan Weldon, Christopher Lee, and Stacy Karen. Stacy, I do hope I got your name correct.
You did.
Good. My name is Libby, and I'm the convener for this session. This session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. Because they retain the copyright to the information they are presenting, they may choose to request its removal from public viewing in the future by written request to the NWIL committee chairperson. However, at this time, it is planned that recordings will be made available once captions have been added. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. To turn live captioning on, click the CC link at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitle. If you have a question during the session, please use the Q&A function in Whova, and I will pose these to the presenter at the end of their presentation. When the presentation ends, please complete the post-session survey in Whova, located on the conference homepage. We will also put it in the chat. NWIL and presenters appreciate and use your feedback. And with that, I will pass this off to our presenters.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank you for joining us today as we highlight some of our experiences with our implementation of Rapido. My name is Stacy Karen, and I am the ILL coordinator at Cal State Fullerton. And I'm joined today with my colleagues, Chris Lee and Megan Weldon. Chris works at our CSU Chancellor's office, and he sort of oversees everything resource sharing for our system. Megan is with Ex Libris. She's currently working on Rapido and sort of the customer experience. But during our implementation process, Megan was the interlibrary loan coordinator at Cal Poly Humboldt, and so she's very familiar with the CSU system. I also want to recognize Joe Gerdeman from Cal State Los Angeles. He's not presenting with us here today, but he was part of our implementation team, and we couldn't have gotten along without him. So we just want to say, yay, Joe. So to begin with, I'm going to give you some background of the California State system and our libraries. Then Chris and Megan will follow up with some details more specific to what is Rapido and how our implementation process went. So go ahead, Chris, to our next slide. So here you can see some of the major details of our California State University system. And although we are all academic libraries and we're in the same state, historically our libraries didn't strongly identify as one system. And there are a lot of differences between our libraries and campuses. For example, our largest campus has an enrollment of over 40,000 students. On the extreme opposite end, our smallest one has under 1,000 students. So while we are the same, we can always find our differences among us, but all our libraries do share the same desire to provide the needed resources and research materials for our students to succeed. So next slide. So how did we sort of transition to come to think of ourselves more as one system or a consortia? In 2017, all of the CSU libraries migrated to Alma and Primo and what was called our Unified Library Management System. It was the first time that all of our libraries were using the same operating system. The efforts among all our library departments and the entire CSU system during this transition started to steer our thinking and actions to be more on a consortial level. It was also at this time that we began using Alma resource sharing for physical items among the CSU libraries. We branded this service as CSU Plus. And our hope was that the unmated workflows combined with our existing courier delivery service among the CSUs would create a faster turnaround time for our patrons and easier workflows for our staff. So what happened? Next slide, Chris. Well, to start off our CSU operations, Chris volunteered his daughter Lilith to show us how much fun our workflows could be. But on the more statistical side of things, we found that the introduction of CSU Plus into our catalog increased our resource sharing amongst the CSUs. An interesting note was that our libraries that use the CSU Plus as a default search in their catalog, as opposed to only the library's local holdings as the default, saw a higher increase in request levels. So as a system, we were able to fulfill more requests for our patrons through our own system than we had traditionally done in the past. Our next slide. So in 2019, when the CSU libraries were approached to participate as development partners with Ex Libris and their new resource sharing platform, Rapido, it made us start to think that maybe we could expand our CSU Plus system and to actually be able to put the plus in our CSU Plus system. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Megan, who's going to give you some details on what exactly Rapido is.
So what is Rapido? My colleagues Stacy, Joe, Chris, and I had been working on Rapido for some time as development partners. We had to then explain what it was to our broader CSU community when presenting it to our consortia as a means to expand CSU+. When I was on the CSU team, this is how we came to describe Rapido. Rapido is a fully unmediated resource sharing platform. Requests placed by the patron go directly to the lending library. Patrons discover an item in the catalog and the request goes directly to the lenders, meaning that unless staff have created a mediation rule that would apply to that request, it goes directly to a lender without staff touching it. From our experience with CSU+, we know that this automation improves turnaround times. Though don't fret, as staff have the ability to create mediation rules to stop requests for staff review if needed. For example, a rule could stop anything that was published in the past 2 years if staff want to be considering these items for purchase instead of borrowing them. Mediation rules can be created for factors that are important to your library, but unless a rule affects the request, it will go from the patron directly to a lender who owns it and has it available. Rapido can process print materials, electronic materials, and even copyright. So Rapido manages requests and workflows for both physical and electronic materials, things that your patrons want shipped to the library, and things that will show up in a digital format. Rapido uses pods to connect libraries, yet it can also connect to other partners. Let's get more into that on the next slide. Use of pods makes for shared terms, which supports automation and makes for transparency for your patrons. For example, the CSU pod has a term of 3-day delivery and 112-day loan with no renewals. All libraries who have opted into this pod perform resource sharing with these shared terms. It also means that there isn't a need to make lending strings for each request or annually evaluate partners based on various parameters. Your request is submitted by your user and it goes to the first partner. If that lender can't fill it as it isn't on the shelf when they go to pull it, they reject it and the system recalculates availability to then go to the next partner in the rota. If it can't be filled by any of the libraries participating in that first pod, it will jump to the next pod and so on. So you join the pods that have the terms that work for you, and then you order your pods. This pod process comes through in your patrons' discovery experience. For our CSUs, the patrons will see a 3-day delivery and 112-day loan period for any items available for partners in the CSU pod. If the items aren't owned by the CSU pod, then they discover something by one of their other pod partners, and the users will see the terms for that item based on that pod terms. Many other Rapido libraries are mixing in locally managed rotas, which contain libraries that aren't using Rapido. Some nest a rota of Consortia partners prior to Rapido partners, or some have them slipped in further down the line. It just depends on your preference, but the system will move the request along based on your preference and availability. Next slide. So in summary, our development team was excited by the potential of the automated workflows and the promise of the simplified user experience with Rapido. From going live with CSU+, we saw how unmediated workflows in Alma decreased turnaround times. We'd previously seen a minimum of 8 days on average for physical items in our other systems, and that was just counting the time from when the staff submitted the request to the item received. That didn't even include the time from when the patron submitted it to when our staff got through to processing it and sending it out to the lender. Then with CSU+, Alma resource sharing workflows, we saw the entire process drop down to 3 days. We wanted Rapido's unmediated workflows to speed up processing times for more of our requests. Beyond the automated workflows, we understood Rapido to be an opportunity to be a big improvement for our library users. This aspect of Rapido is what had my buy-in. A part of this is the transparency of the request terms at the point of discovery. Our screenshots here show that a user experience of the known terms versus an unknown terms. The other big part of the patron experience to me was the ability to have our patron request experience stay in one place. They aren't having to go to the catalog and then go out to an additional form or website, or pay attention to 2 different types of library accounts or 2 different request types, or know all of the ins and outs of how we got their items for them. Our patrons could just see it, request it, get it, all in one place, and have a consistent CSU experience with less knowledge and access barriers involved in them getting what they need from their libraries. The dream of bringing it into one system for our patrons would also be an opportunity for our other set of end users, ourselves, the staff, to be working all within one system. We could do all of the physical and article processing in one system. With all of this opportunity that we saw in Rapido, our development team became an implementation support team, with Chris being lead on all things implementation for all of the CSUs. Next slide.
Thank you, Megan. So after 5 years using CSU Plus, we felt the Rapido benefits would be a good fit to expand and grow CSU Plus, just as my daughter Lilith grew since we pretended to ship her through CSU Plus when it first launched. But implementing a new system is a lot of work, so we broke it up into 4 stages. Our first step, as mentioned before, was to test configurations and workflows as development partners. Cal Poly Humboldt, CSU Fullerton, and CSU LA volunteered to be development partners, and their resource sharing staff worked together to test Rapido. In this stage, we gave frequent feedback and asked a plethora of questions to Ex Libris to make Rapido work as well as possible for the CSU. This was helpful, but unfortunately, the CSU is still 24 libraries with many different customizations. So there was no way to completely test the system until all the libraries were on board. This brings us to the implementation. This step is where Ex Libris added Rapido to the library's institution zones, but the service was not live on the patron side. We were able to configure Rapido and test workflows using a bookmarklet that made Rapido visible in our current environment for testing. Several issues were discovered during this phase, as is expected, including the nature of Rapido in the central discovery index, some scope customization issues, and a network zone specific display logic rule bug, among a few other smaller issues. But with consistent communication and help with Ex Libris, many of these issues have been fixed or greatly improved, and more improvements and fixes are coming in future updates. We then focused on staff training for several months. During this time, I met with resource sharing units over Zoom, and we practiced the workflows from requesting a book as a patron, to fulfilling the request, to checking it out, and ultimately returning it to the library that loaned it in this test run. Finally, it was time to go live on June 13th of this last year. Switching over to the live environment took a lot of preparation, and there were some configurations that needed to be made on the go live date concerning the active patron view. But all of these configurations were made, and a few new issues did appear. But with Ex Libris on standby, we fixed many of these issues within a single day or 2. So since go live, we have worked with staff to continue to tweak Rapido to make it a smoother experience. Over several months, the amount of issues and questions from staff have decreased dramatically. Some libraries have remarked that they are still unhappy with the state of the system, but others are thrilled and see it as an improvement over legacy systems. Regardless, we are continuing to improve Rapido as early adopters and are excited for what the future of the system brings. So now that we have been live for a while, what are the current benefits we are experiencing? Adding articles and book chapter processing is a great improvement for our patrons. They can now download articles directly from their library account in the same place where they see the books they've checked out. They no longer need to log into a separate system to see the status of different library requests, as shown on this slide here, where they can see the status of their request. While many CSU libraries used Rapid ILL in their legacy systems, 6 CSU libraries did not have access to Rapid ILL before. But since Rapid ILL is an integral part of Rapido, they suddenly have access to the service for the first time. This improves article borrowing greatly. Requests are also much more transparent to patrons. With Rapido, patrons can check their library account and see the shipping status of their requests, as shown here again. This is a handy feature that will hopefully reduce phone calls asking for, when will my book arrive? Has this gone through? Stuff like that. Lastly, Rapido successfully adds new partners to CSU Plus as we had hoped. Many of our libraries are already on the Western and US pods, so they can easily share with partners outside of the CSU using those groups. So as with any new product, there are some issues we have found as early adopters. Thankfully, many have already been fixed or have fixes coming in the next couple months. One of the largest issues is the display logic rule that hides Rapido offers, aka the Rapido request button, for items we own in full text online. This does not work with items held in a network zone. So if you're not in a network zone, this shouldn't affect you at all. This bug has been reported to Ex Libris, and a fix is scheduled to come in the November update. In the meantime, CSS code added to Primo does successfully hide the button at the right times. This was tested and a fix was rolled out to the rest of our libraries a few days ago. The good news for anyone considering Rapido at this time is that this issue won't be around by the time you go live because Ex Libris has been diligently working to fix it. Another issue is the complex nature of ALMA letters. ALMA letters are configured using XSLT coding, which many library staff are somewhat unfamiliar with. This issue is noticeable with Rapido because the system uses existing letters that may already be in use for other library functions. Ex Libris is working hard on improvements in this area, and I am confident that they will come. But in the meantime, the CSU has worked hard on the Rapido letters used to print pull slips, lending slips, borrowing slips, and shipping labels. We have shared this code publicly on our wiki website for any Rapido library to use as a base for their letters. Using this code, we can ensure certain necessary information is printed, such as scannable barcodes for receiving Rapido materials. And if you have any questions with that code, please feel free to contact me and I could try to help you oversee. This code will also be updated from time to time, so it is worth checking out our wiki if you want to keep it up to date. And it is very easy to use. You just copy and paste the parts into your letter and you're done. Another issue we are still working on is the Iliad as lender of last resort functionality. This isn't too surprising as the systems are competitors. You wouldn't necessarily expect Pepsi and Coke to share recipes or for an Xbox to play a Nintendo video game. But at the moment, it is helpful to send requests to not be filled in a Rapido pod to a previous system while the Rapido network grows. Once the network is large enough, this won't be an issue at all. We'll be able to do all of our resource sharing within Rapido, no problem. But in the meantime, Iliad as partner of last resort works great if the patron username in Iliad is the same as the patron ID filled in Alma or the full email address of the patron's Alma account. If the usernames match, Alma and Iliad will be able to share information. But if they do not match, then the systems can't really match the patrons together. But fixes on this issue are also incoming, so it shouldn't be an issue for too much longer. So if you are looking into Rapido, you shouldn't have to worry about this too much. Lastly, I wanted to share an issue that has been fixed already. At Go Live, Rapido ignored the hold shelf expiry date, so Rapido requests would sit on the shelf until they were either picked up or they were due back at the lending library. Ex Libris was extremely fast in fixing this issue, and Rapido requests can now be configured to expire after a chosen length of time using the hold shelf expiry date. So enough of the things that are currently being improved. I want to share what I recommend for anyone looking into Rapido. There are a few things I recommend all Rapido libraries do while preparing to go live with Rapido. First is to allow adequate time to make sure all letter configurations are how you want them. I especially recommend ensuring the lending slip contain the external ID barcode so the library borrowing the material can scan the paperwork to receive it. This is very easy to add. Once again, you are free to use the CSU's code. Discovery issues were a surprise during go live for the CSU. I don't have a background in discovery, I have a background in resource sharing. So, this was a bit of a surprise. And I wish I had spent more time talking to our libraries about discovery needs prior to go live. So think ahead and get all your display logic rules and search scope configurations ready in advance to save a lot of headache and confusing conversations with your librarians. Just make sure everyone's on the same page beforehand, basically. Lastly, I would double check your RapidILL harvesting sets and publishing profiles prior to go live. Not too long ago, the naming structure was updated, and it would have been helpful for me personally to have all the changes in place prior to go live, so I wasn't trying to do multiple things at once. But if you do these things, your Rapido implementation should go fairly smoothly. I also have some Consortia specific recommendations. If you're not moving to Rapido as a network zone Consortia, you can zone out for a bit here. I would double check your NC holdings are uploaded by Xlibris. This just slipped through the cracks in all the many things we were working on. And it made sharing within the CSU amongst ourselves not work as well as we thought it should, because many of our holdings weren't available on Rapido. But once it was discovered, it was a super easy fix, and Xlibris got it fixed for us ASAP. Ensure all your libraries are using the same letters to print items. Some functions can use different letters for the same function, but the available letters may have different XML data. I had many questions about why a letter wasn't looking right, only to find that the letter that we configured was turned off, and a different letter that we had not configured was on in its place. So again, it's more of a communication thing. Lastly, if you have custom local resource types configured in the network zone, make sure to also configure them in each institution zone. This will allow you to make display logic rules concerning these custom resource types, which works very well and makes it so you can do stuff like make sure that you cannot scan a DVD, which is definitely something we want to do. All right, so that's where we're at now. So where do we go from here? The CSU will be evaluating Rapido over the next year or so. To do this, we will track Rapido statistics in Alma Analytics and compare them to previous year's resource sharing stats. We'll also gather staff feedback. Numbers can help tell us if the system gets more materials at a faster pace, but it cannot tell us if staff like using the program. We want to make sure our staff are happy with their work if we are going to fully commit to something long-term. Finally, we will be sharing the assessment with our library. We'll also likely have follow-up presentations like this one to share our experience at that time. It is too early to say if Rapido is a success, but I am very hopeful and optimistic that it will be. Especially with Xlibris's continued support, they have been great. So the main driver in the success of Rapido, though, lies beyond any one library or consortia. For Rapido to succeed, we need to grow the number of partners in the network. While this is easily done when libraries join Rapido, other Alma libraries can also contribute to the network and start sharing materials without joining Rapido. An easy way to grow the Alma resource sharing network is to share your data sharing profile. This will let other libraries know what materials you own and make it possible for them to reach out and ask to be your partner. It does not share stuff like patron data, stuff that's very confidential. This can greatly help libraries connect similarly to how libraries share materials in other resource sharing systems. Please consider turning on your data sharing profile whether or not you're on Rapido. And maybe we can start sharing materials with each other already. So, and now back over to Megan for some closing statements.
So looking forward, the CSU have internal evaluation and an assessment to perform. I always like working with numbers, and you've seen that from any of my presentations from Humboldt. So I had to take a peek at analytics. For their first full month of being live, I saw that overall Rapido libraries were seeing an average fill rate of 87%, and our CSUs had an average fill rate of 83% with a range of 63 to 100. They'll do further assessment, which I'll be staying tuned for. Looking forward to Rapido, we have a few major themes. Growth. The reality is that Rapido and XZebras resource sharing solutions are growing and growing quickly, and we'll be exploring new opportunities and means for that growth. Today, Rapido is only available to Alma customers. Based on the success of Rapid ILO and Rapido, we are exploring the opportunity of a standalone solution. Chris mentioned other opportunities for growth, which include interoperability with other systems. One such flavor is the Alma libraries adding themselves to the resource sharing directory and turning on data sharing. Further connections with the broader ILL ecosystem is also a priority. Achieving extensive interoperability and integration across resource sharing systems and networks is the vision. We want to simplify the integration process and make it more accessible to libraries to expand the libraries that they can connect to it. Another means for growth is a compatibility with cloud apps, which can be developed even by the user community to expand or support functionality in ways that are specific to those users. For example, an integration that was important to the CSUs was Reprints Desk, and soon we'll see a cloud app that will support integration and the use of Reprints Desk by CSUs and others. Staff are one group of end users, with staff time being the most expensive aspect of resource sharing. Rapido workflows are maximized for automation. When I was at Humboldt, we went live with CSU Plus, both our lending and borrowing volumes doubled at the same time as a decrease in staffing. But due to the new automation, we didn't feel that hit. We could handle it. That was pre-Rapido with the network zone doing Alma resource sharing. But now that process of automated workflows applies to even more of the requests and even more formats. I've heard this similar experience when I have my one-on-ones with Rapido libraries. A library's volume went up, but due to the automation and less work that they were seeing, some of the staff had suspicions that it had gone down until they looked at their numbers. They shared their surprise and delight at seeing their ILO growth. We want to continue these forward-thinking workflows that support the work and sustainability of that work. We have a strong interest in enabling digital delivery whenever possible. As such, we are active in the controlled digital lending community and have established a focus group to develop a solution for resource sharing. Rapido was designed for the end user. That's what had me really excited about Rapido and why I wanted to be a development partner in the first place and why I understand Rapido is the future of resource sharing. Keeping users in one place and simplifying the discovery and request experience and making the user experience comparable to other services and platforms beyond the library is key to keeping users happy and keeping libraries accessible and relevant to our communities. I look forward to hearing more about the CSU journey with Rapido. And for Rapido, you'll see a development roadmap come January 2023, and you can see more about the future of Rapido then. Thank you.
Here's how you can contact us if you ever want to reach out.
We do have a few questions, if that is a good time to do this.
Yep.
Okay, question number 1. Remind me, are all the CSU libraries using Rapido? If no, how do you fill a request a user needs?
All CSU libraries are using Rapido.
Excellent. Not Rapido specific. How long are you holding ILL returnables before sending them back if they're not picked up?
That depends on the library. Many of the libraries are, if they're not picked up, it's usually only a week or two. But it does depend on the library. That's more of a local decision. But yeah, not too long.
Excellent. Do you have an ILL request form separate from the links in the Discovery System Primo? Do your faculty use the links in Primo or do they prefer the ILL form?
Again, this is kind of depends on the library. Most of the libraries have in the main Primo pages, you're only seeing the Rapido buttons. The whole goal is to send everything through Rapido, and only if it's not filled to send it to a legacy system so that we can accurately assess on how much the Rapido network can currently handle. But some libraries still have the link available on like their resource sharing information page for just they haven't removed it yet, or or it's just their kind of a legacy thing. But there are some that have completely scrubbed any Iliad or other resource sharing links from their website. So we're kind of a mixed bag, and we're going to be seeing how these different models work, and putting that in our evaluations. But yeah, the main goal though is, again, get everything through Rapido first and foremost.
If I
Along
may oh, sorry, I heard somebody
And
talk.
additionally, there's a blank request form within Rapido. So if somebody didn't find what they were looking for in their discovery experience, they could go to that blank form. If depending on how staff has things set up, maybe that type of request goes through mediation for staff review first, before it goes out to Rapido libraries.
Yeah, and that's active everywhere as well.
If I may interject my own question, because it's on topic to this one, if they fill out a blank form and it still isn't found in Rapido, is that the point at which you can transfer the information into Iliad or your other legacy system?
Yeah.
Like, what's the mechanism there? Is that automatic or is that staff mediated to make it an Iliad request?
It depends on if you have Iliad last resort, set up, or if you don't have Iliad last resort, it can actually send a message to the patron, because maybe it's been some time, and they can, maybe they don't need the item anymore if they needed it ASAP for a paper or something like that, and they can then make the request in a legacy system. But there's also, we are exploring now the search for partner function, which lets you look for partners outside of your pods on Rapido. When we set that up, you'll hit that before you'd hit moving things to a legacy system, and then but in doing so would mean that it wouldn't be doing that just automatically. It would be stopping at this point, letting you check the wider Alma network, and then if you still can't find it, you can move it onto the legacy system.
Okay, thank you. Is there any initial patron feedback so far about the changes?
I work, not at a single library, so I don't hear too many of the patron stuff unless it's sent on to me. And many of our libraries just started the semester a few weeks ago, so I haven't heard too much feedback. Have you heard anything in particular, Stacy?
We haven't really heard too much here from our patrons. I think we were sort of expecting to hear more, and the system's being used, things are coming in, we're processing things, and we haven't really heard much either way, good or bad. It's just, we know the system's being used, and things keep coming in. So we're hoping it's good. We still keep sort of lurking, it's just your suspicions, but
yeah,
so far so good. We haven't heard back from, librarians have started teaching their instruction sessions. We've had a few questions, but more just, do they have to create an account like our legacy system and that, but no real complaints at all.
nice. Another question. I'm sorry if you answered this already. Which ILS did you switch to from Rapido? Do you miss anything from the old ILS?
Most of our libraries used Iliad, but not all. There was, I believe, one on, I want to say, WorldShare, and those are being used at the moment as backups. I personally haven't used those systems for a few years, so this might be a better question for Stacy, if there's anything you miss.
We're still sort of using the two systems. We'd like to get just down to one. And I think we're trying not to compare how one works with the others. We just want to make the one work as efficient as possible. Because we know from doing the transition to Alma and Primo, you can't sort of take what you had before and stuff it in and make it work just like that. So far, workflows are doing good. The only difficulty now, the two systems at one time, which can be a little hard on training student assistant staff and staff in the building. But otherwise, everything seems to be, there's always a little hiccups here and there with any system you start, but pretty smooth so far.
Next question, can the Rapido request be placed into other online databases outside of the Primo VE discovery system?
I'm not sure. Do you know? I mean, we're all on Primo VE, so that's what we're using.
Yeah, at this time, Rapido is reliant on folks using Alma, so they're using Alma Primo VE. Folks can request things though, like if they're in the different databases, there are requests coming in via like open URL resolvers, if that answers the question. But everybody who at this time who's using Rapido is using Primo VE and Alma.
So if I may ask a follow-up question to that, are you still receiving requests or Iliad for people that don't have Primo VE or Alma?
Well, yeah, if those systems are turned on, they're getting requests from libraries that aren't on Primo VE and Rapido.
Are you getting a significant number of those?
I haven't had a chance to dive into all of the analytics yet, and the semester's just started, so we don't really have a good baseline to compare with. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at in the evaluation over the next year or so.
And to my
Nice.
knowledge, the CSUs haven't necessarily set up a lot of ISO partners in their Rapido environment yet, but other Rapido libraries I've worked with have set up their ISO partners so that they're funneling more of their traffic into just into Rapido.
Thank you. Few questions from Zoom just popped in. What percentage of requests can't be filled in Rapido and have to pass into Iliad?
Again, I don't know the analytics on that yet. That's something we're working on.
Also from Zoom, who manages Rapido, Access Services or Interlibrary Loan?
That depends on the library, because in some of our libraries, the resource sharing department unit is part of Access Services. Other libraries, it's part of kind of combined with like some cataloging, stuff like that. So it really depends on the library. Usually it is, resource sharing staff or fulfillment staff, or those are the same people often. So, it just depends on the library.
Yeah. Next question, how will Rapido be different for institutions that don't use the network zone?
That might be a good one for Megan, because I only have experience with the network zone.
I was gonna say, first off, it might be easier implementation process. You're not necessarily corralling 24 libraries and trying to get everyone into the same place. So there's that piece. But Rapido works fine whether or not you have an institution zone or network zone. As Chris was saying in his slides earlier, there were some bugs that were specific to network zone stuff that you wouldn't see if you were just an institution zone library. So those things are being worked on, but Rapido works for folks on just an IZ, not an NZ.
Thank you. Next question. Is the lender of last resort Passover affected by institutions using SAML?
Using SAML?
Yeah.
Many of the libraries using that use SAML identification. So, and it seems to work just fine.
Okay. Next question. Apologies if this has already been answered. Is there an easy way for ILL staff to transfer requests initially recorded in Iliad or an ILL system to Rapido?
No, my understanding, and again, I'm still learning on this capacity, but my understanding at this point is if the request was placed in, like if you're in the transition period or you're using two systems and you're going live, the systems originally placed in Iliad or your other system are going to stay in that system until they're completed. They aren't going to roll into the other system. But I could be wrong, but that's my current working knowledge on that.
Yeah, usually it goes the other direction. There is one case where we've been doing this for a long time before Rapido, where you can use the INSIP to, you receive it in Iliad, and then you just want to make it so the patron can check a book out, and they can use the INSIP function for that. That works fine. But usually it goes the other direction, at least in our experience.
Okay, thank you. Several thank yous in our chat. I do not have any more questions. So if somebody has one, please toss it in the chat or the Q&A. And if not, I believe that we are closed unless you have anything else to add.
I just want to say that I'm thankful for the Ex Libris team's continued support and help, working out the bugs we have found, and they're continuing on that. And so, it's already a smoother product than when we went live a few months ago, and I'm confident it'll continue to get smoother and smoother.
Well, I don't see that anything else has come in. We have excellent presentation, more thank yous in chat. And personally, thank you for such a good presentation. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you all of the conference folks for putting all the work into making this happen.
And please remember to fill out the post-session survey when it would be useful for us and our presenters. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.